What is up?
Welcome back.
Hey, if you're watching, it's the first time you're watching.
Crazy.
So this is our attempt
Mm-hmm.
to do a live stream video.
First try.
So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We got a lot of things to talk about today.
Yeah.
First thing, Joe Rogan.
Attending church, apparently.
We got to talk about this toolkit right here that I have on my desk. And I also want to talk about the latest in the Russia-Ukraine craziness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Haven't heard much.
And then there might be some other things that we talk about.
Yeah.
But welcome to the show.
You're listening to a local church podcast hosted by my dad, Pastor Ryan Markham. Be sure to leave a review and share this resource. Love God, love people, make disciples.
With you. All right, we're back.
Hey.
And I want to jump into this thing. So we saw, I think you saw it first, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and looked at it. I didn't watch the whole podcast, right? So
Yeah.
apparently Wes Huff, a Christian podcast influencer kind of person from Canada,
Mm-hmm.
is all over the internet. He's been on Rogan. He's been on other podcasts, and he mentioned something about Joe Rogan on the Sola podcast, which is something we're going to react to. So we're going to try this out, see if it works, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But let's listen.
All right.
And then we'll pause if we need to pause. But let's hear what he has to say about Joe Rogan.
Joe Rogan and I have had on and off communication since then. I can tell you for a fact that he is attending a church and that has been a consistent thing. And so things are happening, and he's a very inquisitive individual. And I think for the better, in that he's communicating with me and other people in his life who are influences that can speak into these issues of reliability and trustworthiness and verisimilitude of something like the pages of scripture, and where he should and shouldn't be looking for the information in regards to that. So I am very encouraged by the communication that I have been able to have with him and others over these last few months in this kind of crazy season that I find myself in. But we're seeing what I don't think is an exaggeration to say somewhat of a resurgence in interest in these topics that we've been talking about, even the nitty gritty. We had someone who reached out to us recently at Apologetics Canada, who is probably the last bricks and mortar Christian bookstore that I've ever heard of. But they said, we have people walking through our doors asking, young people, teenagers, saying, I want a Bible. All my friends are reading this thing. So if the Bible is becoming popular with teenagers, then something is happening and the Lord is moving.
So let's stop there. So he says Joe Rogan's attending church, and it's a consistent thing, right? So we don't know what kind of church it is, I don't think.
No,
I don't know
I would
if
love
he
to
says
know.
that or not. We don't know what kind of church, but he is attending church consistently, and he is talking to Wes Huff, I guess.
I'm curious
about it.
how consistent he is, because, I mean, Joe Rogan's a busy guy.
Yeah,
Whether it's UFC or podcasting.
I don't know how far in advance he does his podcast.
Yeah.
But here's a couple things about Wes Huff, Canadian apologist, theologian, right? I would say influencer because he's
I'd say historian.
all over the internet. He does teach, I think, at a college or a Christian college somewhere. He is probably one of the most, I guess, current Christian podcasters out there. Like, he's everywhere right now, it seems like. And Rogan, everybody knows Joe Rogan. He's a podcaster, comedian, UFC
Not to our
person.
level,
but he's done a whole lot. But he doesn't shy away from the spiritual conversations, right? With scientists or whatever they're astrologists, whoever he has on the show, comedians. It seems like it always goes there he's just trying to dig in and see kind of what is out there as far as truth is concerned, I guess. He has talked to he's talked to Jordan Peterson. We can go there if you want to, but Jordan Peterson talks about Christian things. I don't know that Jordan Peterson is a Christian. He might be, I don't know. His daughter has a podcast, I think, and she talks a lot about her faith. So I think she professes to be Christian.
I've never heard him profess anything.
He did do that Genesis study and then the Job study. I've not watched any of those. If you watched, I think you got to pay for them. But anyway, besides the point. So Joe Rogan talks to a lot of people. If you don't know who Joe Rogan is by now, you probably need to go Google that and YouTube it, and you'll find a whole bunch of rabbit holes to go down. What's your take on this? I mean, is it relevant for the church?
So my initial thought was, let's not do what we did with Kanye.
Ooh,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, because like we pushed Kanye immediately into like the start a worship service, and he's now speaking at different churches, and it went downhill so fast. I'd hate to see that to somebody. Hate to see that happen to somebody like Joe Rogan, because I think he's got potential.
I have no expectations.
Yeah.
I mean, I like Joe Rogan, his podcast, because there's a lot of interesting things, conspiracy theories,
Yeah,
history type things.
but there's also a lot of like psychedelic.
Oh yeah,
stuff.
There's a lot of that. I just don't know. You pray for folks, right? I don't know
Mhm.
Joe Rogan personally. Wes Huff, however, does know him personally, right? And
Mhm.
they talk, they communicate. I think it's a great thing. I think things are happening when you see. It's like when you read Scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, and you begin to look at like, hey, there seems to be this time period towards the end, right, where Christ returns, that faith is going to be important, right?
Yeah.
And people are going to be searching and looking for the truth. And I think we see that in our culture. Is there a lot of people who are seeking like what's true, especially with like AI now and
Yeah.
all those kind of
Yeah.
things. I sent you a link yesterday. I forgot who did it. Go on X and you can look at it. AI, and there are like news casts
Google
and
VO.
commentary. There's a whole lot of things out there right now that seem like they're legit people talking about legit news, and it's
Mhm.
all AI, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
holy cow, this is like, it is clean. It doesn't look like AI. It looks legit.
Yeah, it's funny because when you sent it to me, I, even though knowing it was AI, was still trying to watch it. Like, is this actually
It sounds
AI?
legit. You know what I mean? Yeah.
That's the difference. Is the only reason I knew it was AI is because it
The topics.
sounded it sounded like you
Yeah.
could hear it in the voice a little bit, where it sounds robotic almost.
Yeah. Carl Henry. You ever heard that name?
No.
Theologian. He says the gospel is only good news if it gets there in time.
Ooh.
And why do I bring that up? Joe Rogan, in particular, right? Wes Huff is taking advantage of the opportunities that he has,
Mhm.
right, to go on, a plethora of podcasts and things. I mean, the Flagrant podcast that Wes
Yeah.
Huff went on, I've never listened to the Flagrant podcast. It's a bunch of comedians.
Yeah.
And he goes on there and he is inundated with like cultural sound bites and questions of
Yeah.
like, I gotcha questions. And I wouldn't say flawlessly, but he stands his ground and
Mhm.
he presents the Christian faith in a real, simple, tangible way.
Digestible.
Yeah. And he goes on Joe Rogan prior to the Flagrant podcast and he just lays it out there, right? He could have shied away from it and been like, you
Right.
know what? This is Joe Rogan. He's popular, way more followers than I would ever have, right? That kind of thing.
He could have shot away from the
Yeah.
gospel and just been like, "Oh, I don't want to like offend him or anything like that."
But I think whether it's nominal or not, I
Mhm.
don't know Joe Rogan personally. Wes does, and he says, here on this podcast that he's consistent, and they talk about it. I guess.
I'm just very curious what church it is.
Yeah, that would be interesting. Church attendance, right? So we can talk about church attendance. Just because you attend a church doesn't mean you're a Christian.
Right.
There are a lot of people who attend church that seek something,
Mhm.
and there's this innate created, mold in us. Romans chapter 2, right? It's our conscience. God created that to seek out the truth, seek out Him, reach out to God, right? Whether Joe Rogan's doing that or not, kudos to Wes Huff for being the guy that's maybe watering.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I mean, there are a lot of more people, early people before Wes Huff that talked to Rogan about faith and things like that. Wes Huff is just another one in line to maybe water that. Here's some passages to think about.
Okay.
John 4:13 and 14. This is from the Samaritan woman at the well. Whoever drinks of this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks of the water that I will give him will never be thirsty again. Joe Rogan is probably looking for that thirst quenching, like what is truth, right? What is the faith, right? All that kind of thing. Jesus is where it's at, right? If you turn to other things, maybe even religious, like attendance, right? You'll never be satisfied, right? Jesus says to the Samaritan woman, like, you're going to come back to this over and over and over again. But if you drink from what I give you, you'll never be thirsty.
Mhm.
Like, it's pretty cool. Romans 10:17, faith comes from hearing and hearing the word of Christ. Wes Huff had the opportunity to do that, and he did it. And Joe Rogan's taking advantage of that now, I would assume. Isaiah 55:1, come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, right? You'll never be thirsty again. how does this apply to the church? Like, why would the local church need to talk about Joe Rogan, or
Ooh,
should it even,
good question.
or should it even look at Joe Rogan, right? Or I mean, as we hear things like this, because we've seen the Kanye thing, we've seen the
Yeah,
Justin
yeah.
Bieber thing, Justin Bieber and the Selena Gomez thing, who have all
Mhm.
professed faith, right? And
then
really,
you
there's
look
not
at
a whole
the
lot of
fruit,
fruit.
right.
Yeah, going from there.
I would say personally, especially if you know who he is or you listen to his podcast, you now have to be very careful about, like, okay, what's he saying? Where
Yeah.
is he going with his faith, or the faith that he may or may not?
Think about like the local church that he's attending.
Yeah, yeah.
Why would it matter to them? Like, because
So that's
like if Joe Rogan walks into our church,
yeah.
people be like, "That's Joe Rogan. That's Joe Rogan."
Maybe
Joe
some of
Rogan's
them.
here,"
I don't
right?
know
Yeah.
that a lot of people might
Yeah.
not even
Maybe
know.
maybe some of our local church, maybe not knowing.
Yeah,
Be hospitable.
yeah.
You never know who's going to walk through the door, right?
But no partiality. Don't
That
show
too.
partiality.
I think a lot of churches. This is not talking to anybody in particular,
Yeah.
but everybody has their seat, right, on Sunday morning, and if you get in my seat, I'll give you a dirty look, right?
Yeah.
So be hospitable. If it's Joe Rogan or just the person you don't know or have never seen before, you never know what that person's kind of walking through, right?
Yeah.
But just be hospitable. I would say second thing, to the pastor that Joe Rogan walks in, you would have this thing like, oh, I need to step up my game because it's Joe Rogan, right?
Is that how you would feel? Like,
I
honestly,
don't think so. I would preach you've heard my Easter sermons, right?
Yeah.
I get after it pretty hard with the gospel. Like, hey, we're not good. Jesus is. That's the answer, right?
Mhm.
I would say to the pastor that Joe Rogan's walking, or anybody, period, is preach the gospel without a filter.
Undiluted.
Yeah, like doesn't matter who's stepping in the door per se. Preach the gospel.
Yeah.
Third thing, ready to disciple. Right, we don't disciple well in a lot of our churches. We think we do. We do. Hey, we got Sunday school. We got a
Yeah.
sermon, and we're gonna send you home with some products or whatever. Here's our program. Be a part of that.
You're talking about like one-on-one personal.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
if Joe Rogan walks in your door, or anybody, right, seeking something, seeking truth, disciple, right, one-on-one, walking through what is the gospel, what is all of that good stuff. Anything else with Joe Rogan? Like, what else would we?
No.
What else is there to say?
I don't want to say. That's the thing, is I don't want to really say anything. I want to
Yeah.
just kind of
See,
sit back
observe.
and watch. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, next segment. You can't really tell probably this thing right here. This is the Nine Marks toolkit that
Can you see it
Nine
a
Marks
little
just recently pushed out. It is
bit? I
a
don't know.
practical resource for churches on church leadership, right?
Mhm.
The really cool thing about this resource is it fits where we are right now as a church. And when I say church leadership, it's really teaching, and it's a tool, right,
Mhm.
to get churches to think about elders, deacons, the proper roles, but also how to change your current church polity or leadership. Like, if you're here, here's kind of a way to flow through it.
And
Don't
if
just
it's like if you're here and you want to be here.
yeah,
Type of deal.
don't change. Don't try to just take an axe to everything and be like, I'm changing it today.
Yeah.
So why is it important that a church, I guess, understands what Scripture says about leadership, elders, and deacons? Why does it matter?
I would first and foremost go to the problem of power. Not for everyone, obviously, but I think the power structure can get very unbalanced. Whether it's one pastor who's got all the power, who's making all the choices, who's got all the finances that they're taking care
yeah.
of, or it's the other way around, where like all of the deacons or the treasurers or anybody that has all the choices or all the finances or everything on their plate,
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Yeah, no, that's good. A good buddy of mine, I'm not gonna say his name or the church, but he was a part of a church where the lead elder, the pastor, right, the
Mhm.
senior pastor, he started the church, but he also was the financier. Like, he ran the finances.
Mhm.
He did everything flowed through one person's hands. And after a while, after several years of maybe 2 years of this guy, of my buddy working with him, he's like, hey, there's some things we need to, like, checks and balances kind of things.
Yeah.
And it turned out like there was a whole lot of sketchy stuff going on that one really knew about, because it was one person dealing with the finances of the church, dealing
No
with
accountability.
the offering of the church, the deposits, and all that
Yeah.
kind of thing. It's the senior. I would say as a senior pastor, don't ever put me in a situation where
Yeah.
I'm dealing with
Yeah.
deposits and withdrawals and things like that. I mean, this senior pastor elder was writing the checks to the staff too. Like everything flowed
Oh.
through his hand. But again, he started the church,
Yeah.
right? It was kind of his baby, maybe from start to finish. I don't know anything about the church.
But at least he realizes that, like, hey, this is not the way it's supposed to be,
Yeah,
and is trying to change it.
After he addressed it, the senior pastor and another elder sat down with him and was like, "Hey, it's not working out for you," and so he left. They left the church. His
Ooh.
family did. So yeah,
Okay.
it's rough. So I think you hit the nail on the head. Is like leadership structure matters, right?
Yeah.
Power matters because I think it's Abraham Lincoln. Give a man power and you'll see his character, right? It's a good
Sure.
it's a good quote. Go look at it. But here's some highlights. So elder training. So one of the things that I really like about this is it gives you examples of other churches, leadership description, elder description, deacon description. But this also gives you a study. It's a 6-week study on elders and deacons for your church. And then it also gives you a process of training and calling out elders. It's really cool research. I can't
I still
say
need to
enough
get
about it.
mine.
Yeah, it's about, I think it's $110
Yeah.
on Amazon. Man,
It's worth it because it comes with this. It comes
Yeah.
with the online courses and videos and
Yeah.
downloadables.
Yeah,
and-
once you buy it, like you go to the website, nonmarkstoolkit.com, and all the videos are there. All
Yeah.
the PDFs are there. The chapters are written out. Even the study guide's written out. It's really cool
Mhm.
to, I guess, begin to implement a biblical model of New Testament leadership, right?
Yeah.
Of polity, right? We don't use the word polity a lot, but most churches, I think, that's a generalization, but I would say Southern Baptist churches, a lot of the times, deacons are the ones running the show. Maybe in
Yeah.
the background, they're still running the show, but the New Testament, we see, hey, there's elders and there's deacons, right? And so what are those roles and how they play out? It's really good, really important. Here's a couple of passages. Ephesians 4:11 and 12. And he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and teachers to equip the saints to do the work of the ministry. Super important, right? We see Paul writing to the church. He's like, look, there's specific roles for specific people.
Yeah.
And then we also have the qualifications, 1 Timothy 3 and Titus chapter 1. We see character's a big deal, right? Doctrinal integrity, do you know the gospel, right?
Yeah.
Things like that. Super, super, super good. So if you're a pastor, right? I don't know if any pastors watch this show, or if you're a church member, how about that? There's a lot of people that listen that might be church
All
members.
church members.
Non-Marks Toolkit. That's what it is. Non-Marks Toolkit. And I would recommend it to your church, recommend it to your church leadership. If you're a pastor, recommend it to you to check out. Good small group material. We're going to implement it in the next 6 weeks. So this current 6 weeks, we're talking about finding and knowing the will of God. And then the next 6 weeks, we're going to look at elders and deacons. And hopefully good things happen from it. So we'll see. Next segment.
Transition.
John series, right? So we ended chapter 4. We start chapter 5 this week. Are you excited to take the helm?
I am excited.
You don't sound very excited.
Well, no. I told Shannon, she was
Yeah.
just like, neat. Love that for you, but she was like, well, it's a week. It's like you don't have a ton of time to like actually really prepare, I guess. But I'm not necessarily preparing. It's more of just review, get
Yeah.
used to it, and then present.
Yeah, I mean, really just read through it. It's going to pop out, right? I think the big thing for chapter 5, and we're going to go back and look at the end of chapter 4 here in a second, but for chapter 5, John really begins to describe the religious leaders, the Jewish leaders, like the Pharisees,
Yeah.
really starting to go after Jesus because of this moment in chapter 5. Jesus, I mean, we see it in chapter 1 at the very beginning. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. He came to his own didn't recognize him, right? Jesus is God. John makes that very clear in chapter 1. Chapter 2, 3, and 4, you see, hey, he's doing miracles that only God could do. He's saying things that only God can say, right? And then in chapter 5, Jesus is like, look, I'm going to pick a fight, right? And he says, he says, I'm doing the Father's business, even though it's the Sabbath. Like I'm doing the work. And then, John even mentions in chapter 5, the very beginning that we start this Sunday is like, after this moment, they go after him. It's not about the miracle of the man who's invalid, right? It's about Jesus declaring publicly, hey, it's me and God. He's
Yeah.
my Father, right? And I'm going to do his business.
He's making him
even though it's the
himself
Sabbath.
equal to God. Yeah.
Yeah, we see the compassion of God and the criticism of the Jewish leaders, right?
Mhm.
And we even see the complacency of the man who is healed, and he still runs after the Jewish leaders and like, look, it's Jesus. He did it.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he took a side, like most people would take a side. It's either Jesus or it's legalism, right? Jesus or the traditions of whatever, right? It's really blatant in this passage coming up, chapter 5. But we end with chapter 4, right? So, sorry, go back.
All right.
Jesus reveals himself to the woman at the well, and she tries to deflect, right, when he calls her out on her sin, things like that. And then the disciples come back, and then the woman at the well goes off into town and says, hey, come see this man. He knows everything about me. This could be the Christ, right? And the town sees Jesus. They invite him in. He stays with them. And then they say something like, we believe Jesus is the Christ, not because of what you say, but because he's been with us, right? And now that we know the things that he said, things that he's taught.
Mm-hmm.
And we see something really cool here at the end of chapter 4 is that Jesus, he addresses the people at Cana, right? The Jewish people. And then he addresses a Samaritan. And in chapter 5, he addresses an invalid. And we see this progression, like the gospel is for everyone, right?
Yeah.
It's not just for a set group of people, even though Paul would say it came to the Jew first and then the Gentile, right? Which, yes, that's the progression of how it happened. But the gospel itself, John 3:16, right? Anyone who would believe, all who would believe, right? Everyone who believes can have eternal life. And that's what we see kind of play out at the end of this, is that her testimony changes a village, right? It changes a
Yeah.
town. And similarly, for anyone professing Jesus, if your faith isn't moving deeper, I can tell you why it's not moving deeper. If that makes sense. And I said that really weird.
That almost that sounds like you're trying to step on toes,
Well,
even though I know you're not.
Yeah, if you're not sharing your faith, you're not going deeper in your faith.
Yeah.
If it's surface level, hey, I believe in Jesus, it's personal, and I'm just going to keep it like that, you're never going to go deeper into that sanctification. You're never going to go deeper into your faith. But this lady meets Jesus, and then she tells a whole town.
Mm-hmm.
And the town is like, hey, this is the Christ. Not because of just what you said. Now we know him, right? Want to go deep in your faith? Step out in faith and share Jesus. And yes, it's scary, it's weird, it's awkward, and especially with your family or people that know you, like they know your mistakes, they know your hiccups, they know all your failures, and yet that's the place where Jesus has you to say, look, Jesus changes the past of everyone, right?
Yeah.
I'm no longer defined by that. Yes, I have to deal with the consequences of my past, right, or things like that, but I've been forgiven.
Yeah.
And
I can't remember who said it.
I'm going
but
to walk forward. Yeah.
There was a good quote I heard recently that someone said that the ground is level at the foot of the cross.
Oh yeah. I mean it's good.
So
It's perfect.
That's the idea.
Yeah. The idea. I mean, we talked about this before, but most folks that aren't church going folks that don't have a faith, right, would point at the church and say, a bunch of hypocrites, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say one thing, but they really don't do anything. But at the cross, we're all hypocrites.
Yeah.
We all say one thing and do another thing. But it's the man and woman who step out in faith and say, look, yeah, you may know me from way back when.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about Jesus, because he's changed, my outlook. He's changed my perspective, changed my purpose, all that good stuff.
Changed our hearts.
Yeah, he's made me something new.
Yeah.
And many people will reject it and be like, yeah, you're still the same person. I don't want nothing to do with it. And that's okay. Do everything you can to share Jesus.
Yeah.
And if you're rejected, you're rejected. Go to the next house, right?
What's Jesus say?
He says, dust off your feet.
Yeah. Shake the dust off.
Yeah. Now, I'm not Jesus, so I'm not going to tell you to do that. If whatever situation you're in, pray for that person, for 20 years. Visit that person for 20 years. Never give up on the person. I would say never give up on anyone.
Yeah.
But there comes a time where if there's so much rejection by one person or one family or whatever that is, there is a point where Jesus says to his disciples, dust off your feet, go to the next house.
Mm-hmm.
If they want nothing to do with Jesus, they want nothing to do with Jesus, right? That's the hard part. I've talked to folks who have listened to the gospel and they've said thank you, and that's it, and I can move on, right? There's just not much. If the urgency is not there in the person listening, it's
I think
tough.
one thing that's even harder than that is when you know someone who grew up alongside of you
Yeah.
in the faith, and then it's not necessarily that they walk away, it's just that they kind of fade off,
Yeah.
right? And you might talk to them about Jesus and they're just very complacent.
Yeah. Or just very matter of fact, like,
Yeah,
okay,
just,
thanks.
yeah, cool.
The end of John chapter 4, there's an official and his son is dying.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes from Capernaum to Cana, which is uphill, and it's 20 miles.
Mm-hmm.
And he runs to Jesus and says, hey, please come heal my son. He's dying. He's on his deathbed, right? He's near death. And Jesus responds with something really awkward at first. And he says, if you see the miracle, I forget the exact words. You see that?
I've got it pulled up.
Yeah.
It says, unless you see
Yeah.
signs and wonders, you will not believe.
Yeah, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. And at first reading, it's like, why would Jesus respond that way to somebody that says, come heal my son?
Right.
The you there is plural. He's not just talking to the man at that moment. He's talking to anyone who would follow, anyone who would believe. And he's saying, will you believe even if I don't answer the way you want me to answer?
Right.
Right? Will you believe if the outcome is not what you want? And it's a big moment. In the sermon last week, it was just like, I hope it was an aha moment for people. Like, we place our faith in Jesus oftentimes to get something else. Jesus, if you just answer this, I'll do this, right?
That's literally what Jacob did in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
God, listen, you do this and I'll follow you. And he just kept pushing the goalpost further back.
And the guy's son was dying. And Jesus is like, look, what if I don't heal your son? Are you going to believe? Right?
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about this, I transitioned from that moment before I went on to the next part, because the next part's even better. Not I'm better. The next part's the passage is better, right? That kind of thing. I asked the question, especially in those moments of like loss, sickness, diagnoses, right? Whatever it is, harm, hurt, pain, all that good stuff, to the myth of God will never give you more than you can handle, right? And a lot of people say things like that to try to console or to comfort, but it's false, right?
Yeah, it's
the truth is, the truth is, God does give us more than we can handle so that we would depend on him, right?
Right.
Or believe in him. That's where Jesus is getting at in this moment. We used the 1 Corinthians 10:13, when God will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, and though he gives you a way out, right? And we say, well, it says it right there. He'll never tempt us beyond our ability. That has nothing to do with suffering, pain, hurt, whatever it is, death. That's about temptation, being tempted. All throughout the New Testament, Paul even writes about his journey to Asia, and he's like, we were at the point of death. We were beyond our strength, and we went through this so that we would be dependent on God, not ourselves, right?
Right.
Think about Gideon, Judges chapter 7. God says to Gideon, hey, you got these 32,000 men, and you're going to go up against this the Midianites? No, take 300.
Yeah.
And so God takes his army like down to nothing. And God says in verse 2, I did this lest the Israelites think they saved themselves and not me, right?
I think about Job's story.
Yeah, even
in
Job.
particular.
Like all most of the things we see in the Old Testament and the New Testament, God is saying, look, all these heroes, they're not good enough, right? All of them had to be dependent on God. And so from that transition, it goes into this guy's going back to Capernaum. So he's going from Cana to Capernaum. Remember, it's 20 miles. It's very interesting, and I hope it came out in the sermon.
I need to go back and watch it.
One of his buddies, I don't know if it's a servant or a friend, comes to him and says, hey, your son's healed, right? Or Jesus says after this moment, hey, go, your son will live, right? That kind of thing. And then he starts to walk back, and then the guy asks, hey, when did it happen? And the guy, his buddy said, yesterday, when Jesus said, right? It happened yesterday. So think about what is going on there in time and space. From Capernaum to Cana, it's 20 miles. He runs to Jesus. Desperation, right?
Yeah.
Everybody is equal in desperation. Just like the foot of the cross. When things happen, we're all equal. He runs. On his way back, he gets the notification, hey, your son's alive.
Notification.
And it happened yesterday. So what does that mean about the guy? He took his time going back. Why? Because he believed Jesus said, your son is going to live. And so he walks back more than a day because he says it happened yesterday. And so he's walking back slowly. And so his faith goes from, I believe the words of Jesus, to now it's impacting how I live my life. It's impacting the speed at which I go back home. If that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a piece there that he didn't know before.
Yeah, it's big, but then it even goes even further. Remember the progression of faith. If you're growing in your faith, going deeper in your faith, you share your faith.
Yeah.
What does it say at the very end?
So I'm gonna start
before
53.
the last verse. Look at verse 53.
Yeah. The Father knew that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live," and he himself believed, and all his household.
And his household, right? So it's not just personal. There's no such thing as personal faith, right? If you believe in Jesus, it's evident.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And it impacts, it's like a domino effect. Faith is powerful. If my faith is evident to the folks around me, it's going to impact the folks around me, particularly my family, right? And so his whole household. Now that includes blood, but it also includes anybody that works for him and things like that. It's big.
How weird would it have been for that child who's on death's door all of a sudden just be like, "Oh, I'm fine."
Yeah.
And then he doesn't know why until his dad gets there.
Yeah, he's like, "Hey, look, there's this guy named Jesus, and he said you're going to live."
And then you did.
I believe his word. And so we need to believe in him, right?
Right.
And it impacts the whole household. So it's a big moment. And then this coming week, we go into chapter 5, and now there's this big transition where Jesus is like, look, now is the time for me to display who I really am, right? A.W. Tozer says, faith is the gaze of a soul upon a saving God. J.C. Ryle says, saving faith always has an object, and that object must always be Christ. Here's a couple things to think about.
Okay.
Like the woman, your past doesn't disqualify you from being a witness for Jesus, right? So get that out of your head. We often think they know who I am and they're going to judge me and they're not going to believe me. That's Satan telling you not to witness, right? That is not God telling you not to witness. That is Satan. There's a really cool song by Shane and Shane. And I can't think of the name of it as soon. No, I'll have to come back and think about it.
Okay.
It's this whole song is like, I'm telling myself or something like that, I'm not good enough, things like that. And then he says kind of towards the transition, and then I tell Satan or Satan's preaching to me the gospel. Like, I'm not good enough, but he is, right? Yeah. It's a really cool song. I'll have to put that in the link.
I'll try to find it.
I'll figure that out. And then like the official, right? Bring your crisis to God, right? Or to Jesus, and then walk away believing that he has it in his hands. Not bring your problems to Jesus and be like, he's going to make it all better. Right. Bring your problems to Jesus and say, he's got it. He's sovereign. He's in control no matter the outcome. I'm going to believe even if the outcome's something different than I want, right?
Yeah. So you got me thinking about what the rate of belief is if a father is a Christian.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to look that up. Do you know what it is?
The rate?
Yeah, like the rate
of a family? It's like 90-something%.
Well, this one, according to ChatGPT, says that 75% of the children will continue attending church or become regular churchgoers as adults if the father is regular. Yeah. If the mother, it's only 2 to 15%.
Yeah, I don't like ChatGPT's version. I think it's Barna. Barna has a really good one. I think Barna. They say if the father goes to church and he shares his faith and he brings his family, it's like 91, 92%, they'll become believers, right? If it's the mom, it's really low, like that 15, 20%. It's really low. If the dad is involved in church and displays his faith to his children, it has a huge impact on his family, right? Now, moms, I'm not saying anything negative about moms. Moms need to go to church and share Jesus, especially those single parent moms, right? That are doing the best they can. Share Jesus. Find a man that loves Jesus and marry him. Yeah. And be the family that God wants you to be. And then lastly, Jesus is the one that truly satisfies. So whether it's the Samaritan woman or the man who's in desperation, they both meet Jesus, right? And Jesus is where the satisfaction of the never thirst again, but also where I can have peace even if I don't know the outcome, right? That kind of thing. This is news, right? So I don't know if you want to go into rapid questions or anything else after this. This is all I've got for this podcast.
I don't have any questions. I'll pull some up.
But this is so the latest of Russia and Ukraine. People really aren't thinking about it anymore because it's kind of on again, off again. But Russia just recently launched this huge drone attack on Ukraine, even though there was a ceasefire going on. There was a humanitarian kind of trust there, and Russia's like, nah, whatever, we're going to keep bombing. And so the recent reports, you've seen it all over the news probably the last couple of days, unless it's Jacob and he doesn't look at the news.
Yeah.
But multiple Ukrainian cities were bombed during a ceasefire, and the event continues to highlight the brokenness of the hearts of man, right?
Yeah,
Russia,
humanity in general.
even Ukraine, right? There's this need there. There's a spiritual need, right? But there's also now there's this humanitarian need amidst war. Here's a couple of passages, and I don't want to just Jesus juke the topic. There are wars and rumors of wars all the time, right? Jesus said you're going to have trouble, but fear not, I've overcome the world, right? Psalm 2, 1 through 4, the nations will rage, but why do they rage, right? Why do they rage? That's the question. It's because it rages because that's what people do, right? We sin and we rebel and we want power and we want all of it. And unless the hearts are changed, right, to have an affection for Jesus, affection for the things of God, we're not going to love our neighbor, right? We're going to try to rule and take over. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers, the peacemakers. And so this is my plug for, like, look, if you're in the military, don't feel guilty about being in the military, even though there's a whole lot of arguments about, you shouldn't be a Christian and be in the military. How dare you? That's wrong.
I've not heard that. Interesting.
It's out there. And I would say Jesus specifically says in the Beatitudes, blessed are the peacemakers.
Yeah.
How do you make peace, right? That's the question. That's the age-old question. We say in the military, prepare for war, pray for peace, right? And so you can do both. Romans 12:18, if possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Sometimes it's not possible, right, to live peaceable. And so there has to be decisions we make. Habakkuk 1, 2, and 3, oh Lord, how long shall I cry for help? All throughout the Psalms, God, where are you?
Yeah.
The nations rage. The nations are prosperous, right? All these things. And what is the age-old answer to the age-old question, why does God allow evil?
Are you talking about the typical answer?
The answer that maybe you've used before. I'll give one that I've used before, but I want you to give you one that you've used before.
Okay.
Why does God allow evil, suffering, war, famine, tragedy? Why? If God is a good God, why does he allow these things?
It's our own fault.
Okay. That's a deflection answer. I like it. Why does God allow it?
Oh. I mean,
it's
what?
tough. The dead air.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, if you're watching, it's a question that you will be asked in conversation. Why does God allow so much evil? And then you can also use the R.C. Sproul deflection. If God wasn't in control, how much more evil would there be?
Right. Well, it comes back to my thoughts, like I answered, is that, one, we want that. We want evil. Jeremiah 17:9 says that the heart is deceitfully wicked, and who can know it, right? But why does God allow it? I think also points to Christ, right? If there's just a bunch of wickedness going around, where's our hope? Where's our joy come from?
Okay, I like it. I like all those
What's
things.
your
are good.
answer?
So there's a couple answers. So one, you can do the Jordan Peterson thing. What does it mean by allow? What do we mean by God allowing evil? Here's the thing: does God create evil?
Mm-mm.
No, he does. He's not the author of sin, right? Man is, right? Through the deception of Satan. So we're the authors of rebellion and things like that.
Yep.
God doesn't do that. Why would God allow is a tough word, right? But let's just use it for now. Why would God allow us to continue in our evil or let evil win, supposedly, right, in the eyes of man? Acts 17 is a good place to start. Paul is walking through the Areopagus. We've used this before on the podcast. and there's this unknown God that they worship. And he's like, look, I'm going to tell you about this unknown God. He's the creator of all things, right? He's sovereign over all things, meaning where each person would live, the time period they would be, the boundaries they would have, the exact moment where you and I are right now. It's in the sovereignty of God's hands that we would be where we are right here doing this podcast today, right?
Live, kind of.
All of it, right? And so why does he do this? Why does he allow certain people to live in the ghetto and certain people to live in luxury? Why does he allow people to live in Ukraine and the United States? Why does he allow people to live in Africa or Asia, right? Why? It's humbling, right, for us who woke up one day and like, look, I'm a kid in the United States and I've got everything I ever need.
Yeah.
But there are people who live in war-torn areas and see evil all day, every day, for their entire lives. Why would God allow this? And Paul answers the question in Acts 17. He does the boundaries and the times and the places so that we would reach out to him, right? I think we've used this maybe on this podcast. In the Western church, we're the microwave theologians, right? Everything we want is at our fingertips.
I've never heard that.
Right? So microwave, it's instant, right? Everything we have, we got what we want. And we often neglect dependence on God because I've got it all. I'm comfortable. I've got a good job, right? I've got freedom, right? All those things. And we neglect God in the face of evil, tragedy, pain, hurt, suffering. What do?
Immediately turn to him.
God.
Yeah.
Right? And so Paul answers the question really good. He's like, it exists. We experience the things we experience so that we would reach out to God. And he even caps it off with, though he's not far off.
Yeah.
He's there, right? And so, yes, does that appease everyone? No, right? That's not a good answer for everyone because you can always poke holes in every answer that somebody gives you. This is the answer that we see in Scripture is that God does this sovereignly so that we would reach out to him. Now, Paul also writes that the afflictions, the pain, the suffering that we go to, it's light and it's temporary.
Compared to the glory that's coming.
There's something coming that's way better, right? And again, you can go down that rabbit hole of what the Christian outlook is. Should we just look to heaven or should we make heaven on earth? I would say yes to both.
I would say most people would probably also turn from that answered question to, well, how would they even know to look for God? Right?
We do.
And Paul answers that too.
So as a pastor, right, even as a youth pastor, I've had conversations with folks who have gone through something tragic as not believers. And often the first place they go to is like, hey, do you know a pastor? Do you know someone who's a believer, right? Or something like that. Or they'll reach out on Facebook like, hey, I know you go to church and I'm dealing with this. Can you pray for me? Why would they ask? Why? Because they all know intrinsically, because God has created us in his image to reach out to him.
Yeah.
Even though we may not know what that means, what that looks like, right? But if I know a Christian, I'm going to reach out because I know they pray, right? Or at least I think they pray, right? We're reaching out to something that we really don't know, but it's God, right? Just like the Samaritan woman, she's thirsty, she's hungry for something more than going to the well by herself. And Jesus says, if you just knew the person who was offering you the drink, right, or asking you for a drink, you would say, give me the water, and you'll never thirst again.
Yeah.
Right?
I had somebody, this is just a funny little story. While I was managing Duncan in Campbellsville, I had somebody come up to me and I had known them for a while, I'd worked with them for a while, but they came up to me and were like, hey, you're cool with God, right? Can you pray for this thing?
Yeah.
Can you I don't remember what they said. They said something about can you check the vibe of this? And I was like, hey man.
Nice.
That's a weird way of wording it, but sure, I'll pray for you.
Yeah. That's
saying, hey, you're cool with God, right?
But it's a way of reaching out.
Yeah.
Though he's not far off, right? They just don't know how that reaching out works or what that looks like. And so here's a couple of final thoughts. Unless you got something else to jump in. Anything else on your head?
I mean, I pulled up some questions.
All right, let's do questions and then I'll do some final thoughts.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there. All right. So these questions again, I have not heard them.
No.
You've not seen them until just now.
Right.
And so forgive me if I answer them wrong or badly, but here we go.
Well, these aren't going to be crazy deep or anything. So, numero uno, if you could time travel to one Bible event, where would you go and why?
One Bible event. Oof.
Yeah.
The resurrection. I mean, that's probably that's the moment of Christianity, right?
Yeah.
Without the resurrection, there is no Christianity. I would say the resurrection. But before that, Now, what am I a person on the ground, or am I like a fly in the wall?
Let's say you are a person on the ground.
So I was gonna say the flood, but forget that.
Yeah. No.
Oof. Oh, I mean,
I think the
There's- there-
Areopagus would be cool. To hear Paul.
I think that would be cool. There's Roman persecution going on, so I'm not really sure. Pentecost would be a good one.
Oh yeah.
The resurrection.
Or like Jesus' ascension into heaven, just seeing that happen
Yeah,
would be
yeah.
bizarre.
I would like to see the 40 days, the resurrection, and just be like Jesus talking and teaching.
Yeah.
Because he teaches and talks for 40 days. We don't really know what's going on there,
Yeah.
but there's 40 days of more, right? There's 40 days of things that are going on that would be cool to see.
What
Yeah.
about Jesus' missing years?
No.
Just to see him like work regularly as a carpenter.
Nah.
Just him putting a door together.
Nah, because I think the time has come, right? Jesus mentions time a lot.
Yeah.
It's not my time. The time has come. All those things. I don't know that there's much there, and
Yeah.
because the Bible even tells us like he wasn't much to look at.
Right.
I would say the resurrection,
All right.
or the 40 days after the resurrection.
Okay. What's one Christian phrase we need to retire?
God will never give you more than you can handle.
Oh yeah, just mentioned it. Okay. Let me see. Ooh, this is a good one. What's a minor doctrine people get way too passionate about?
Oh, minor doctrine.
I'd have to think
How
about
to
that, too.
baptize.
Ooh,
Yeah,
hot take.
yeah.
What makes you say that?
I've been asked that a lot, and people. I mean, just a lot of things. I don't think it matters on how you baptize because there's all
What
kinds
about
of different.
age though?
Yeah, there's all kinds of when like age how to baptize, like how old to baptize someone. I don't think that's a thing for me. My hot take is how to baptize. Like,
Okay.
is it full dunking? Is it sprinkling? Is it splashing? Is it
yeah.
whatever? I think it's something people get way too hung up on.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What's the funniest church moment you've ever experienced?
Funniest church moment.
I might do one more and then we'll be done there.
I don't know. Funniest? That's kind of.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, you've heard things of like guys leaving their lapel mic on and they go to the bathroom, right?
I've never heard that before.
I've not experienced that. Funniest, I had Robin, my wife, cook French toast in the sanctuary before people came in before a sermon.
Oh yeah,
And
I think you told me that.
There was lots of smells in the sanctuary. I don't know if it turned out the way I wanted it to, but yeah.
I had a situation. So this was years ago, and we were going to a really small country church. I think it was a family reunion type deal, and the bathrooms are right behind the pulpit.
Nice.
And I had to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, my cousin goes, "Dude, we could hear everything." It was a problem.
Yeah, that's
So
funny.
yeah.
That's fun.
The last one that I saw that I think would be a decent is what's the most underrated minor prophet,
Underrated?
and why is it Nehemiah?
I don't think it's Nehemiah.
No.
Nehemiah has a big role.
That's fair, but he's not talked about.
I mean, Jonah's a minor prophet, right?
Yeah.
I don't. So major, minor, right? So if you're listening, major is
Or watching.
or watching. Major prophets would be for like people as bigger, broad group, huge group, right?
Think about Isaiah, Jeremiah.
And then
those.
minor would be like specific moment, specific person, specific people, right? That the message is to. I don't know. Ask the question again, but like better.
All right. Which minor prophet is the most underrated, or maybe the most overlooked? Let's put it that way. Like one that you just don't read a lot. Like, would it be maybe Nahum?
Amos?
Or okay, Amos.
Obadiah, Habakkuk, right?
Obadiah. Okay, funny story about that. Obadiah is one of the books that when we bought some tabs for Shannon's Bible, Obadiah was just left out. Like
Really?
they just
There's no
completely
tab?
skipped over Obadiah. Yeah.
Nice. I mean Habakkuk. I don't think I've ever heard a sermon series in Habakkuk.
I love Habakkuk. I do think he's underrated.
I think Jonah is underrated and overrated. We underrate it because it's like a kid's story, but it's much more than just a kid's Bible story.
Segue. That's actually what we're talking about coming up in youth. We're going through
Nice.
the typical Bible stories, but like how well do you actually know them?
Yeah. 10 years ago, when I became youth pastor here, my first series was through Jonah. The first 4 weeks was
cool.
Jonah. Yeah. I like Jonah. I like the series. It's a good sermon series. It's a good book. Underrated in the sense that we think it's just a kid's book, or a kid's story, right? Closing thoughts. Here we go. Whether it's Joe Rogan, whether it's church leadership, or whether it's Jesus in the Gospel of John, or whether it's Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
There's one thing that's crystal clear in all of it. Jesus is sovereign over all of it, right?
And God gets the glory, yeah.
Over all of it, right? And so when I ask the question, like, how does this apply to a local church, right? I would say for the church, just in general, be ready to
have a defense for the hope within them.
To be saints, right? To do the ministry.
Yeah.
And then trust Jesus even when we don't know what the outcome is going to look like.
Yeah.
In whatever situation that is, whether it's Joe Rogan or whether it's Ukraine or whether it's, my son is on his deathbed, right?
Ooh, yeah.
We trust no matter the outcome. Revelation 11:15, Jesus, he shall reign forever and ever. Right? That's it.
Perfect.
Love God.
Love people.
And make disciples.